last year's Jackson Hole, the Fed switched their policy to flexible inflation targeting. And so what that meant was they would wait to actually see inflation before they started to raise rates. If you look at other central banks, though, around the world, there have been over 20 central banks that have raised rates over 40 times already this year, including Russia and Brazil, where their central banks have raised rates 4 times each already this year. And that's because inflation around the globe is much higher than people want. And in emerging markets where the standard of living is much lower, that's eating into consumers and what they can afford. So they have to act quicker, whereas in the US, it's a richer country. They can afford to wait longer. But I think eventually that's going to lead to a policy mistake where they're going to have to raise rates a lot more quickly because they've decided to wait to see inflation instead of trying to head it off.
There's also talk and debate in the market on how inflation is good for companies, margins, and thereby good for stocks. We'll come to that in a bit. But do you think the Fed would essentially hint at tapering at Jackson Hole, or wait it out for a month more and, of course, give us more details in September?
Yeah, I think the good news, or the way the market is interpreting this, is because the Fed went to a virtual meeting at Jackson Hole, that they can't do anything that disruptive because they're, in fact, acknowledging the Delta variant is having some impact. But you have to remember the Fed minutes came out, I think, last week, and the market went down about 1% from when the minutes came out, and because things were more hawkish than they thought, because at the end of the day, inflation is still running pretty hot. Our view is that the September payroll number, when you have students going back to school in person, so parents can go back to work, and unemployment benefits run out, the extra ones in the beginning of September, you're going to get a payroll print over 1 million, and that's going to force the Fed to start tapering. We see tapering before the end of the year because inflation stays hot, and we see at least 1 to 2 multiple rate hikes next year as the Fed tries to clamp down on inflation, which I think is going to be a lot more persistent than what they're thinking.